Good afternoon and welcome to Metra AV Tech Tips. I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
And we are live
with
our brand new countdown device, which you are 2 seconds late engaging.
I am 2 seconds. So it should be at 10 seconds right now. Okay, well, welcome everybody to another episode of Metra AV Tech Tips.
Says so right there.
Yep, exactly. Now, before we get into what the topic is of the day today, but before that, also like, share, subscribe, hit
click
that little,
the little bell button.
Yep. Share us out through on Instagram. Actually, you can find us on Instagram at AV Tech Tips, and of course share out to all the different social media sites: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Yeah, he's
all
all
that
over
kind of stuff.
Instagram now.
Yeah, well, our producer and as well as some more of the behind the scenes guys are helping us out with that and really kind of making it happen.
We need to have a behind the scenes guys
episode,
photo montage.
A little montage.
Because there's a lot that, what you see, it looks simple, and Adam and I standing out here doing this, but there's a whole lot behind this that isn't simple.
Yeah, definitely. So, but as always, if you all have any questions about whatever it is that we're talking about today, feel free to put them over here in the chat section. Or if this is after the fact and you're viewing after it's pre-recorded, you can check it down below. And as always, you can feel free to contact us directly. Of course, my email is adam.rogers@metraav. And then, of course, you can contact Brent at brent.mccall@metraav.com.
We do have new email addresses and new numbers. With directs.
Yeah, with directs. You can call our, you're in trouble.
Well, I can't turn that off. And I already sent him a text, going live.
That's funny. So he did it on purpose is what he did. You can also contact our tech support. Our number is right down here on the screen. 386-492-8584 is one of the best way to contact us. There he goes again. With all of that said, before we get into the topic of whatever it is that we're talking about today, I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping. So the first off is that we are still doing a giveaway. Of course, last series we gave away the HDMI AIO2 and the CS IR Kit CCUS.
And who won that?
We haven't had we're trying to reach out to the winner. We haven't heard anything back from him yet, so we don't want to announce it just yet.
Okay, until he knows.
Until he knows, and then we'll and if we have to move on to the next one, we will. But until we know for sure that we have the okay to talk about it, then we'll do that. But right now, we are giving away, we're still working on giving away the Velox EHV-HDG2015. Do you know which one that is?
That's the 8K cable that's 15 meters.
Yes, it is. And how do they win?
By having a lottery selection of comments or quotes on our YouTube site that they put in, and they can put in multiple quotes, multiple comments, by the way, at least in my opinion, praise is worth extra points. Adam says no, but I say yes.
Not quite. We gotta leave it fair. So best way, of course, to win, like Brent said,
what kind of election is that?
Yeah, right. Leave us a comment in the chat section over here or down in the comment section below of this episode, the last episode, and then the next 2 episodes after this one. That will each episode that you comment on is one entry into the runnings to win the HDMI cable. We're super excited about it. It's 8K ready, which really, we had the discussion, it's not necessarily just 8K ready, it's 48 gigs ready.
Right, and there's a difference, because the 48 gigs that encompasses a wide variety of resolution, color depth, 444, 422, sub-gamma. There's a whole lot going on inside of the 48 gigs.
Yeah.
And I believe we had that topic last week?
I believe so, yeah, HDMI 2.1.
Yes.
Before we go any further, Leo, it's great to see you always in the chat. Good to hear from you. And Ellen as well.
Hello,
is also
Ellen.
in the chat. And then, of course, we've got Steve Barrett in there as well.
Hey,
and
Steve.
one of our salespeople is in there as well. Hey, Austin, thanks for checking into the video. Okay, so.
Housekeeping.
More housekeeping. We want to talk about some of the things that you haven't been in the office except for these live streams for the past, 3 weeks.
3 weeks, yes.
So,
and it has been quite interesting being out in the real world. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's have you now? It's been nice, not having to come into the office every day. And
have you missed me?
No,
not really.
You don't need to answer that. Okay, so, but I want to take this time to kind of talk about some of the stuff that because even though you're not here, you still take calls, and of course
And
we're
talk with you all day
taking
long,
calls
yeah.
as well. But I kind of want to go over some of the things that we talked about before, and there's one new thing that we want to talk about.
Well, and I have more to add to that one.
Oh, do you now? Okay,
Yes.
more stuff's
So
come
we
up.
get there, yes.
Okay, so the first one I want to talk about is the Yamaha with the Samsung frame.
Yes.
We talked about this 2 episodes ago, I believe, on
No,
last
week.
Wednesday. Or did we talk about it
It was
Wednesday?
last Wednesday.
Okay. So we found a fix for that. And what the problem was, do you remember the problem?
Yes, the issue, they were having issues with communications between a Yamaha and a Samsung frame.
Yeah.
And
Yamaha
ultimately,
receiver, of course, or
yes,
AVR.
Yamaha AVR, a 1080 in this case.
Yep.
Ultimately, we had them switch it over to mode 2, and it appears to
Right.
have resolved the issues. I still want to get my hands on a 1080
Yeah.
and the Samsung panel,
Yeah.
because it has not been the most reliable. Now, backing that up, and here's what you did not know, just before you got back from lunch, I took another call.
Did you know?
A Samsung A2A, one of the
Okay.
new ones.
Yep.
Excuse me, a Yamaha A2A.
Yep.
And a Samsung panel 2021. And they were having some video issues on it.
Yeah.
And walked through setting the mode, and they're going to do that and let me know what the results were. But I think that's a fairly common, can take based on some calls I've gotten.
Okay.
And I am not in any way, shape, or form dissing Yamaha on this one, because that same combination with Sony and LG works perfectly.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So long as that's that's the fix for it, anyways. Hopefully that'll be the way to go with it.
If you have the option, do a Sony or an LG.
Yeah, pretty much.
And if you don't have the option, mode 2.
Mode 2.
Under advanced settings for HDMI
This is on the Yamaha.
on the Yamaha.
Yeah, advanced settings, HDMI, mode 2.
Correct.
Now, if you go in and look at it, you can find it online. If you just do a search for Yamaha mode 2 and like put it in quotes or whatever.
And by the way, the setup varies from series to series.
It does, but you can find a graph about like what each mode
Yeah,
does.
and don't panic if it does. Mode 2 does not give you the 4K 6444 blah blah blah, none of which you can actually use anyway.
Yeah, all at the
Until
same
you
time.
get to 2.1.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we talked about that. Now, and actually, always a Samsung problem. Ellen, the truth is, do you really believe that his ego wouldn't let him come in here and be on camera?
That's what I just said. I told her that he loves the spotlight.
Yeah,
Hey,
exactly.
I can't miss this.
She was asking how we convinced you
Well,
to
that's
come
an
back
easy
into
one.
the
They
office.
said you'll be live.
Yeah, you'll be live. Okay.
Now, I did miss the first Friday.
You did miss the first Friday, and
And I'll miss this Friday.
and you'll miss this Friday as well.
Yes, I will.
Yeah, so we'll try that
Just
out.
in case you're wondering, I will be in South Florida eating.
Yeah, you'll
Delray
be yeah,
Beach.
you know all the sunshine and everything else down
Yes,
there,
I
which
hope.
is more so than the sunshine that we have here in Central Florida, because that's just
South
how
Florida.
the world works. Anyways, we talked last week about needing about a problem with a Control 4 matrix and a Denon or Marantz HDMI 2.1
2.1
AVR.
AVR.
Now, we had the fix for it, and the fix worked. If you all saw on Instagram, I posted a little teaser about what we're talking about today, and this is this is what that was relating to. Now, that fixed that problem. However, a new problem came up for them, and I wanted you and I to kind of discuss this just a little bit, because I want to know why. I know it fixed it, but I want to know why. So here's what happens. They have an LG TV. It's within the last 2 years, so it's a 4K TV on the same system with all of our fixes. So it's a Control 4 4K matrix going out of the matrix into our AIO2, and then also out of our AIO2 into our 1x2 splitter scaler, which has a really great feature where it copies the EDIT of a device and sends it back and then scales down for all the other outputs. It's a really
Right.
great piece. From there, it goes into an extender from a competitor, so I'm not going to say any names right now. However, they do have a really neat feature on their system, on their extender, where you can, it's not easily accessible by the installer. You actually have to call them up for their tech support, unless you know what it is. Then you plug in a USB cable to the extender, and they don't just copy the EDID, they actually change the EDID inside of it.
But we can do that inside of our matrix.
Correct, yeah. So it's the same idea behind it. It's just there's not any canned EDID information
Okay.
for it. It's either the static EDID that it comes with, or copy the EDID that it's connected to.
Okay, so
And they
there
had
are
to
a lot
call
of
them up.
options.
Yeah. So then, of course, it goes from that extender to the TV. Now, everything was working great until 10 hours later. Now, at this client, they turn the TV on, and they usually just kind of leave it on throughout the day. And so then it presented itself 10 hours later that the TV just lost connection. We had no picture. So, of course, they called me back and they were like, hey, you know, this is happening. And I'm like, man, that really, you know, it's super weird because it worked, right? It had the fix for it. And so he did call them up and said, because he remembered that they had a problem like this before. And the system would work okay, and then eventually it would stop working until they copied the EDID of the TV itself. So even though the EDID on the extender had the same capability-wise as the TV, eventually something failed. And I'm not sure what it was, but as soon as they copied that EDID onto the extender, everything started working fine. So really, in effect,
something about that TV was very specific on its EDID.
Something about it, because on our on our splitter scaler piece, we were copying the EDID not of the TV but of the extender. So there was, while it worked, it just didn't fix this next problem.
Okay, so the extender was presenting the copied EDID to our splitter. So then the extender was not properly transmitting the EDID of the TV back.
Or it has a canned EDID that it just uses no matter what.
Right, and that's probably what it was. And my guess is with the hot plug reset, it gave it to it for a while, and cycling through the TV gave up, or the matrix gave up.
One of the two,
splitter.
yeah.
And sending the copied back, it's probably also presenting it more often in a copy mode than in a can mode.
Now this reminds me of the Samsung frame TVs, the smaller ones, the 32-inch ones, where it wouldn't work correctly unless you did copy the EDID.
Right, because it allowed itself to be seen as a better TV than what it was, and that caused some problems.
That's the only thing that I can come up with, and or there's some kind of echo that it's expecting on the EDID, you know, communication channel.
It will tell you it's a 4K blah 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 blah, which we both know it's not.
Right.
And the 4K blah 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 that everything else was showing it was based on standard 4K blah 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 EDID.
Right.
And that TV's not.
No, not the Samsung anyways. Now the LG, in theory, it had all the capabilities that we were sending it. It's just for whatever reason it wasn't working.
The EDID was dropping out.
Now I'm starting to wonder, Leo, you have a good point. He says turn off HDR on the LG. I wonder if that would have done something, because if it was being given HDR
that's
10
enhanced mode.
and well, if it was HDR 10 plus, and the LG doesn't do HDR 10 plus, that's a Samsung thing. I'm wondering now if maybe
no, HDR 10 plus is an HDR thing.
It's an open standard, but it's not used by LG.
Okay.
Whereas Samsung's the only one that's actually using HDR10 plus. HDR10, yes, everybody uses that. HDR10 plus is only used by Samsung.
Currently.
Currently, yeah, because it's the dynamic HDR that they're using instead of using the Dolby Vision. So, not quite sure what's going on with that. I just wondered if you had any insight on that.
My guess is, and as we said earlier, I think it's that when you look at the copied, it's probably presenting it more than the standard canned.
Right.
And when it just drops out, after a while, it just doesn't know who or what.
Yeah. Well, there it is. So, now the last thing, this one was interesting. We had another call. We had this, I took this call last night. The gentleman that called in, he was a consumer, and he had an HDMI switcher that had 2 outputs on it. Now, it had 2 HDMI outputs. So it had 4 HDMI inputs, 2 HDMI outputs. Now, one output was an HDMI 2.0. It was capable of 18 gigs. It was good to go. The second output was an HDMI 1.4, so that he could use it with an old AVR.
Right, which is, it's probably very similar chipset to what the Panasonic UHD Blu-ray players came with when they first started shipping them.
Yeah, because they have of course the audio output only, right? And same with like the Oppos and the other
which was
Sonys
basically
as well.
the same chipset as the
exactly
as the Panasonic.
So my question then, or here's what happened. He called in and said that everything worked great. It synced up with everything perfectly. He would start watching TV, and about between 10 and 20 minutes later, he would get white pixels all across the screen. Now, primarily around like the edges of a silhouette of somebody, or the thing that's moving. And then usually about another 5 to 10 minutes after that, it would fail. Like just no picture whatsoever.
That's an easy one, because that's a first gen HDMI problem.
Yeah, well, what basically was happening at that point. So we stepped back and we talked about what's happening, because we can talk about what it's capable of and what it does, and is it an EDID, is it this, is it that, but we need to look at the symptoms first to really know what's going on. This goes back to our troubleshooting episodes that we talked about. And so really, I'll put this out there as I'm explaining these problems. What do you think, before I get to the answer to it, what do you think that the problem was?
And we have discussed this.
Yes, we have.
Because I personally know this problem, because we have seen it in racks, we have seen it with products behind televisions. We have seen it where things are put too close to each other, and why?
Yeah. So we stepped back and we looked at the symptoms because we had white sparkles. Now, white sparkles mean that we have high-speed data loss.
Yes, they
Usually
do.
it's a white sparkle. Sometimes it's a red sparkles or blue sparkles
But
or
if
green
it's white,
sparkles.
it means all
whole
three
bus.
colors are failing.
Exactly. So at that point, we thought, okay, we were having high-speed data loss. We know that that is happening. The next thing that happens, of course, is that it just completely blanks out. Now, here's a clue. The sparkling doesn't start until about 10 to 20 minutes later. And there's another little caveat to this as well. When he was watching 1080p content, it would play and last as long as he wanted to watch it. It was only when he was watching something 4K, 30, HDR, 10 or 12-bit,
Amazing how that ties
420.
into last Friday's broadcast.
Yes, it did. So with all of that put together, and I don't see any comments yet to tell me what you think the answer is, but all of that put together told us this. It didn't happen when you first turned it on. It only happened a little bit of time after watching something of high bandwidth. Now, Brent, when you have something that's working really, really hard, and it's let's say you're out there and you're digging a ditch, right? Now,
Have you looked at
I'm
me?
just saying, in your younger days, back when, the T-Rex was running around, you had to dig a ditch so you could hide.
Just so you know, when I was in the Army, the reason I jumped out of airplanes is because we didn't have shovels.
There you go. So,
Airborne don't dig.
Good reason. There you go. So, with this said, you're out there working hard and you're needing to work quickly.
You go again.
I know, right? Okay, I'm out there working hard and
There you
I'm
go.
needing to work quickly. Now, if I'm working quickly, at that point, what's going to happen? I'm going to get hot, right?
You're burning more energy and generating more heat.
Now, if I'm going slow, if I'm taking my time and I'm just kind of, getting, one shovel scoop out of the way and then just kind of taking my time, taking a sip of water in between.
Your body's recuperating in a reasonable manner. But if you're working
Right.
quickly, your body's getting hotter,
Yep.
you're sweating more, you're burning more energy.
Yep.
And your body's going to start to break down faster.
So what's the biggest difference between HD video 1080p and UHD video 4K? And the biggest difference, of course, is
How fast those relays are moving.
how fast those relays are moving, how much data
generating
we
video,
have,
yeah.
how many data we have passing in a certain period of time. Well, guess what? That's working harder. We're generating a lot more heat. So with all of that heat, very close, the experts was close. Capacitive loading is what they said. It wasn't a distance problem, so you're very close.
But it emulates a distance problem.
Yes, it does, because it drops out, because you lose picture.
And it does change the impedance loading on the board.
Yes, it does. Not on the cable, but of the board itself.
The board itself, because as it heats up,
Yep.
the board will start to delaminate.
Yep, exactly.
And when that happens, the impedance load changes, and that's the sparkles. And a good way to tell this is if it's white sparkles versus lots of color sparkles,
Yep.
the whole data bus is collapsing. It's not within the cable.
Correct.
It's within the chip.
Yep, exactly.
Now, I am guessing,
Yep.
this is an off-brand device that he bought online somewhere as a consumer.
From what I understood, yes. I didn't recognize the name brand when he mentioned it because I don't remember the name brand. I would have remembered if it was a name
If
brand.
it's somebody real.
Yeah. So it wasn't off-brand. Now we walked all the way through it. So it turns out here's what's happening. I keep saying 48 gigs. At 18 gigs, when we're watching 4K, that chip is heating up very quickly. And we know this because of our extenders, the past of our expanders. We know that with those, you have to have good heat dissipation or else it's not going to work. Well, yeah, but when I touch it, it's not hot. That's probably part of the problem because a lot of times those pieces of equipment use the chassis as a heat dissipation.
Heat transfer.
And so then at that point, it's not going to work. It's going to heat up, and now we have a problem. So
Which is why at the very early ages of HD-based T,
yeah.
we were the first company to put a heatsink on the chipset because we saw that failure.
Yeah. So the problem comes down to specifically heat. What was happening is the unit itself was getting too hot. It was heating up the board, creating delamination on the board itself, losing sync with the HDMI signal, and then finally completely dropping the connection.
Until he unplugged it, it cooled off, he started all over again.
And actually what would happen is he would just not touch it, let it keep running, and just no signal or whatever, and then eventually it would kick back on and he would get picture again.
Because by shutting off the video, right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what's happening. So it's a really important thing. We talk about this a lot. One of the important things, of course, is making sure that you have good heat dissipation inside of a rack system. That's one of the really important things. You don't want to make it too dense inside of there, or if it does need to be dense inside of the rack, you need to have good airflow. We know that behind the TVs, especially with the older TVs that created a bunch of heat, that was a really worrying thing. So Really good guesses out there, guys. Capacitive loading was the experts. They also said a power supply issue. That could also cause the problem.
Yeah, but it would have to be, well, off-brand cheesy from Amazon. It could absolutely be a starving power supply, which will cause a drawdown on the board,
Yep.
which will cause it to overheat.
Yep, exactly. Now, with that, that is one good way to do it. And then Leo is saying a sync issue. And the sync issue is one of the symptoms of this problem. And so losing sync is basically saying, yeah.
Well, now, the sync, typically, when you have a sync issue, it's an EDID failure.
Mm-hmm.
This is not really an EDID failure.
Correct.
This is on the TMDS lines, which
Yes.
are the video feeds.
Yes.
And again, we can tell it because it's white on the sparkles.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a specific color saying, okay, I'm dropping the red, the green, or the blue.
Yep.
I'm dropping video, period, which indicates the chip.
Yeah.
A specific color loss like that typically indicates a cable problem or circuit problem. And generally, if that's the case, it's all the time.
Yes. Yeah. As soon as you turn it on, you would see those sparkles. So those are the calls that we ran into this past week to 2 weeks or so.
And share your thoughts on those and what's happened, and put yourself in the running for the 15-meter, 48 gig cable.
Yeah. Now we're showing off the 80 meter because that's the one I have back here in the lab. But the winning item is the 15 meter. So definitely leave your comments over in the chat section over here, or you can leave them down below in the comment section.
Now, tell me, why do we have a 200-foot piece of RG cable with BNC, 75 ohm BNCs on it?
75 ohm BNCs, because today we are talking about, and I'll hit the button here to make it show up here on the screen. Let's see. Leo says, doing an install right now, and the cabinet guy tapped the coax to the 14 gauge 2 power line.
What? When you say tap the coax, do you mean put a ground to it?
Taped.
Oh.
Taped the coax to the 14 gauge power line.
Little 16 cycle bars
you
across
see that across the screen. You will see that. And we'll talk about
is it the herringbone or the rolling bars?
Hold on to that. We're going to come back to that later on in the episode, because that's how we're going to talk about troubleshooting, because that's perfect for that, right?
Thanks, Leo.
Yeah, thank you, Leo. Okay, so what are we talking about today?
How long was this taping?
Yeah, AHD versus TVI versus CVI versus CVBS.
Now, what do those all share in common?
They are analog camera formats.
And what does that share in common?
They all use coax. They all use 75.
I was working that.
You got it. I know. They all use the 75 ohm BNC connection in most cases. Some systems use RCAs for whatever reason.
But those tend to be kits.
Yeah, and also lower end systems.
Very much.
Yeah. Randall said high bit arrow due to marginal cable length. Oh, for the previous thing. No, but yes, that
and particularly
you would
if it's
see,
a single color.
Yeah, you would see that if that was happening.
Different colors all over the place.
Yeah, you're seeing red, blue, and green
when
all
it's
over.
white, that's the actual chip going down.
Yep, exactly. Okay, back to this. So, what we're talking about today is what is AHD, CVI, TVI, and CVBS, and we're talking about how they differ, how they're the same, also how do we troubleshoot. And thank you, Leo, for that, because that's a perfect thing for us to talk about. So,
now what do all of those share in common other than the coax?
Well, they all share in common the fact that they're basically the same, except for CVBS. And we'll get CVBS out of the way first, because CVBS stands for composite. There you go. You got it? It likes to roll. This table's not level, or the floor's not level is actually what's happening. CVBS stands for Composite Video Baseband Signal. Brent, what's composite?
Well, composite simply means that your luminance and your chroma are combined together.
Yeah, it's composited together onto one signal.
Versus
component, which is separate
or
pieces of
video, which is...
Well, it's also component at that point, isn't it?
No, it's separate luminance and chrominance.
Ah, okay. So they did. I didn't know that. I didn't know that they actually separated that.
S-video was 4 pins.
Okay.
So, for example, you could get just a black and white picture on S-video.
Right. So you would get the luminance at that point without the color.
Right.
Interesting. Okay. So whenever
By the way,
you take...
it didn't do well in length.
No. So whenever you take, here's one of the scenarios that we see CVBS used a lot, and that's in the case where I have a TV and I just want to look at a camera. I don't want to go through viewing it remotely. I don't want to record it. I don't want to do any of this stuff. I just want to have a camera that I can look at. Houses of worship, I do this a lot. You can have bars that have like the TV screen when you first walk in the bar to let people know you're being watched. In those situations like that, it's perfect for this because CVBS, you can plug it into the yellow, you put an RCA connector on the end of it, you plug it in the yellow jack of the back of the TV, and you've got a picture.
Gotta love technology.
That's-
By the way, and a lot of the component inputs on TVs will also treat the green plug as a full composite.
Yeah. Ellen says they are all really old technology.
Yes and no.
Correct. Yes and no. So CVBS, yes. CVBS has been around since the 90s or 80s.
But it works.
But it works, and it works really well. Here's some really cool things. We'll talk about, we're going to talk about TVI first. So TVI.
By the way, I'm old, so I remember this.
There you go. No, pardon me. We're going to talk about CVI first. So CVI stands for Composite Video Interface. It was developed by Dahua. Dahua, however you want to pronounce it. Dahua. It was developed by them in 2012.
So it's a latecomer.
It's recent, right? It's fairly, actually, it's even, it's actually the old one out of those three. So in 2012, it was developed by Dahua. And the capabilities, you go anywhere from 300 to 500 meters in cable length, and it can handle all the way up to 1080p 30 frames per second, and it can carry PTZ controls over the same coax connection.
Which actually, particularly if you're upgrading analog jobs, and you know, there's a lot of coax jobs out there
Yeah.
still.
Now, this is also old information because all of these standards now support 4K. And for the life of me, I was doing as much research as I possibly could to find out how all of that worked. And the only thing I can come up with is that they get 4K
Compression?
by lowering frame rate and doing compression. And that's the only way that they can get 4K.
What is the frame rate? Because I was asking about this earlier.
So at 1080p, it's 30 frames per second, and 4K, I believe, is about 15 frames per
I
second.
believe that's what we can
Yeah. So
However, that's still, at 15 frames per second, in a non-high traffic area, I mean basically not a cash register.
yeah. Ellen,
not
you are
bad.
correct. Ellen says that says that SDI was the first technology. You are correct.
But
Well,
SDI is a digital interface.
it is, and it was after CVBS. So it was the first of the digital interfaces, but it was after CVBS because
And what does SDI not do?
it doesn't.
SDI does not do what?
It doesn't have passback information. It doesn't. No. Wait, what?
It doesn't do 480p.
That's on our mini SDI, but is
No,
that
that's
SDI in
SDI.
general?
That's SDI period.
It just doesn't do 480p.
doesn't do 480p.
Okay. We'll double check that.
And we don't have to, but just that the
I believe
format
you.
never supported 480p.
Interesting.
480i,
Okay.
720, 1080i, 1080p.
Yeah. Now they have
540p.
SDI. Now SDI cameras do come up in whenever you do research on this, you'll find them out there. It's not SDI's for
Not
most of
very
the
common.
consumer grade stuff. It's not very common. For a lot of the higher end stuff where
Vegas
you're using
in the early days.
yeah, a lot of SDI, and actually, in fact, SDI is still used today. Primarily, it's used in video production. They use it when you like when you watch the NASCAR races or the football game. A lot of times, those cameras are hooked up with SDI
Even on the
from
4K.
the camera, even on
It's
the 4K.
4 feed.
Yep, exactly. So, actually, in fact, Brandon, our the camera that we have in there has SDI. Yeah, so we were using that there for a while. We no longer use that though. We're all on HDMI now. It just makes sense for the HDMI company to be on HDMI
Because we're using fiber, damn it.
because we're using fiber. So from there, we go from CVI to TVI. So TVI it stands for Transport Video Interface. Again, it's
They were
300.
starting to reach for acronyms.
Pretty much. They didn't want to sound too far away from CVI because CVI had already come out, and they were looking for something similar that they could still accidentally be purchased. And anyways, they also are 300 to 500 meter cable length, up to 1080p 30 frames per second, and again also 4K capabilities on it as well, and it also has PTZ over coax. Differences: this was developed by TechPoint and it was adopted by Hikvision in very early on. This was roughly in 2014, 2015 in that area when these were actually being taken off.
And just, you know, you're not putting a Pontiac carburetor on a Ford.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. It's still a carburetor, it just doesn't line up.
So SDI does mean broadcast, and it is what's used in broadcast. Ellen saying this, SDI equals broadcast, but not CCTV. There are a few CCT systems that do use SDI. It did come up in search. It's not very common at all. Okay, so AHD, analog HD, it basically just stands for analog HD. That's all it is. Again, 300 to 500 meter cable length, the same as CVI and TVI. Up to 1080p 30 frames per second and 4K. Again, same as TVI and CVI. And it can do PTZ over coax. Again, the same as the other. So, this was developed by a company called Next Chip, all one word. in Korea. In roughly right about the same time, 2012, 2014, if my research is correct. And again, a lot of this is just research that I've done on it. If I'm incorrect about that, let me know. But the AHD system is more open style on the Coax than the TVI and CVI. And so it's more readily available for smaller companies. So you would have seen in the past a lot of the entry-level stuff using AHD instead of using TVI and CVI.
Right, because, well, you got Hype Vision on TVI.
Yep.
You've got DWA,
Yep.
whatever it is, on CVI, and they want you to buy their cameras, their
Yep.
NVR, DVRs, or whatever it is.
But also they want you to
DVRs.
license it. If you're going
Right.
to be using their stuff, they want you to license it. And
Well,
so
what
then,
they really want you to do is OEM through them.
yeah, exactly. Which,
So, and that's, we're back to Betamax, VHS,
yep, exactly.
DVD, Blu-ray, and HD DVD.
Right.
Same thing, but different.
So AHD, again, it was the most open style, which meant that they weren't really requiring anybody to buy it from them or use licensing or anything like that. So they could just go ahead and just build it into their system. It's kind of just an open standard.
Now, are DVRs that offer multi-standard input?
Yes,
What formats do we support?
all of them. Well,
It's just a matter
pardon
of
me,
selecting it.
We offer AHD, TVI, CVI, and CVBS, but it's
Which-
mostly just selecting it.
Right, it's just a matter of selecting it for
Yeah.
the prescribed camera that you have.
So here's what's interesting. Our camera system, which we're going to talk about this on Friday, our camera system, our DVRs are automatic. So if you are using AHD, CVI, TVI, or CVBS, it just detects it and switches over
plug
to
and
that.
play, baby.
Right? Now the cameras, however, because those are the thing that's really driving that part of it, we do have 4-in-1 cameras that you can select which one it is.
If you're connecting them to other brands of
Exactly, and
NVR,
those
DVRs.
are they default to AHD because nowadays AHD really is becoming more of the thing that everyone is using because it's open. More people are developing on it and making it better. But on ours, you can actually select that as well. So that's kind of the backstory on analog cameras or HD analog
Why
cameras.
would you still do an analog camera?
Well, for multiple reasons.
Wow, that was a passing the buck
I was
slightly
gonna
while
say,
you contemplate your
well, yeah.
answer.
Let me ask you a question while I figure out a way to answer your question. No, so you can with analog cameras you have an inherent security on it because with analog you need point-to-point connection. You have to have a connection from the camera, which is encoding it, to the DVR, which is decoding it. Yes, technically somebody could gain access to the wire, splice into it and look at the camera
Yeah,
feed
it's not
there.
quite as easy as you see it in the movies.
But it's still pretty difficult. You still have to cut it. You still have to splice it. How long does it take you to put a BNC in on a cable? It's going to
At
take
which
you
point
that
it's
long
already
to do
interrupted.
that. Yeah, exactly. So, and the whole thing about where you can put a thing on the side of the cable and all of a sudden you've got a great picture. They exist, but they're not. They're a lot bigger than the little pieces you see in the movies. So, anyways. Awesome. Leo is saying they're loving the Spyclops Pro gear. Thank you, man. Really appreciate that.
What is the delay time on an analog system versus a network system?
There's virtually none.
And why is that?
Because it's just signal being passed through. There's no processing being done on the camera except for, of course, picking up whatever it's being given and passing it along. So there's very, very little processing unless it has a DSP built into it.
What is the drawback to analog versus networking?
You can't have it be a decentralized system. It has to be centralized, which means that you have to have home runs from every single camera back to the DVR. The experts are saying because people suck at networking. That's one benefit to analog. Yeah. Not for nothing, yes. If you have a team of installers that, let's be honest, they're not well versed with networking, a lot of times an analog camera system is a quick alternative to put in there, and it just works. You plug it in, you get a picture. If you don't get a picture...
This is certainly a more durable piece of cable.
Yes, it is.
Than a category cable.
Yeah.
And while not impossible to mess up,
yeah.
you do have to work just a little bit at it versus a category terminal.
Ellen, I love it. Ellen is saying analog is used for legacy wiring.
Yes, and there's a lot of it out there.
There's a lot of it out there. You already have a coax line. Guess what? You can put an a HD or now a 4K camera on that line.
Right, so it's not, you don't have to go back and rewire the entire job.
And she says, or for the guys that cannot spell IP.
Wasn't that a Chinese movie, Kung Fu guy?
Ip Man. Yeah, Ip Man.
Just for what it's worth.
Yep.
When the first time, because having no history in this,
right?
The first time I saw Ip Man, I thought it was IP Man.
IP Man. You thought it was a tech movie or something?
I
or
did.
A bunch of hackers or whatever.
I did, and it's like, it wasn't.
Yeah. So the analog system, it does have a place in today's world, and that's not really what we're talking about. We had a discussion about that in the past. Analog is still,
again.
yeah, and we will have it
Probably
again.
Friday.
Probably. So the analog system still has a place, and it has its benefits, but mostly we're talking about the differences and the similarities. So honestly,
The
for
similarities
the three,
are a whole lot greater than the differences.
yeah, the three camera standards that are out there that are HD based, AHD, CVI, and TVI, are extremely similar.
They just are not compatible unless you have a multi-function DVR,
Like ours is, of course,
right,
or our
that you could, they will
XVRs.
either auto recognize or select based
Yep.
on your camera.
So Brent, now that we know what AHD, CVI, TVI, and CVBS is, let's talk about what is going on. Oh, my button's not working. There it goes. What is the difference between them? Do you know?
Are you referring to the encode-decode process?
Yes.
I know there are differences. I don't know the specifics of the differences.
So every part
You
of
can
the
make me look
system,
bad here now,
yeah,
aren't
pretty
you?
much every
Okay.
part of the, yeah, exactly. My turn, right? Every part of the system is basically the same when it comes to AHD, CVI, and TVI. Except there's one. Well, okay, there's more differences. If you were actually to go to Austin says less network traffic. Yes, very good good reason to go analog. So the differences between them, unless you were to go and talk to Dahua or Hikvision or Next Chip, unless you were to talk to them directly and be like, well, what's the difference between you and these guys? They're going to come up with hours upon hours of things to tell you that are different. But unless you want to get down to the nitty-gritty details of the encode and decode process of the signal and why you can't have a CVI system on a TVI DVR, it's basically things like this. The only difference is this thing that says P03100K plus DH9801 and or versus OV9712 plus NVP2431H. Does that activate your
okay, just for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Just for what it's worth.
Yep.
I have studied Algebra 1,
Yep.
2, Trig, Calculus, and Physics.
Does any of that mean anything
I
to you?
have no clue, and I'm being polite in how I'm saying that, what you just said.
Yeah, so basically what that is like, again, the difference between Blu-ray and HD DVD. And when they first came out, they were basically the same thing, just they operated slightly differently.
So
they were
you
both on
couldn't
a
put
disc.
one in the other one.
Yep, they were both on a DVD style disc. You could put it in one into the other one. It wouldn't do anything, so you put it back in the other one. It worked fine. I don't know what the difference is, and except of course in with HD
There's
DVD.
probably a
and all
tag
those
flag
kind of
in there
things.
somewhere that says, I'm CVS or CVI or DVI or whatever I am.
Brent, 568A or B?
Ooh, good question.
Right?
There ain't a damn bit of difference.
There isn't. Now, of course, if you were back in the day, if you were one company that
Xerox
was
or IBM.
there it is. If you were one company and they were using the other kind,
I'm denying your warranty claim.
I'm denying your warranty claim. It's basically things like that. It all comes down to, the dollar. So, with
there's
that,
Stuart.
There's Stuart.
Stuart, come on in, join us.
There's really not much of a difference in those three standards. Now, of course, the biggest difference between those three and CVBS, of course, is the capabilities. So CVBS is just that composite,
Lower resolution.
lower
composite,
resolution.
Yeah.
You can't have a 16 by 9 on a composite connection.
Sure.
It's
we had
960.
16 by 9 TVs in the early 90s that weren't
Yep.
high def.
It was
Proton.
960 by 480 resolution on those connections, and versus 1080p and 4K. That's basically the biggest difference between those, and of course other things like PTZ controls, and of course the distances that they go. So the
Now, I'm
last
going to
little
ask you
bit.
a question because I legitimately do not know this. Is there any delay on the PTZ controls on analog, or is it faster than it is on a network?
It is faster because, of course, we are sending a direct-to-point connection versus an IP connection, which has to be processed along the way. So everything along the way, the network switch, anything else that touches it, passes it along.
So then let me ask you the next question. If it were your house and you could easily home run all the wires,
yeah,
I know my answer, and we've had this discussion.
yeah. I think for me, I'm still an IP person.
See,
I still...
for video surveillance, I prefer the analog because there is no delay.
Yeah. Yeah, with the no delay. Now, of course, that's if you're viewing it on a monitor plugged into the system. If you're still
but even-
streaming it from there, you're going to get a delay.
But it's not going to be as great as a network one.
Correct.
If I'm looking at a networked video surveillance system remotely,
Yes.
I've got a double delay.
Yes. Technically, yes.
And
because it's delaying to catch it, and
internal
then it's
and
going
external.
From there. Yep.
Whereas if I'm looking at analog, first off, it's actually easier for the system to process a single screen
Yeah.
and you're not loading down the network.
Yeah.
So this is lower bandwidth, as Austin said. There is less of a delay.
Yep.
And particularly on PTZs, the only thing that's better than doing it this way over PTZ is having a direct serial interface.
Yeah. I like the expert's response to Austin. They're saying less network traffic if you do not know how to VLAN.
That was also an episode.
Yes, it was. And you are correct, 100%. If you have it VLANed out correctly, you don't have that crosstalk on the network itself, and you don't have to worry about it too much. So, anyways, but yeah, in my own house, I'd probably still go with networking because, honestly, there will come a time when analog hits its limit.
Really? Do you think that cable's going to hit its limit before networking does from a video quality per resolution?
Okay, you're opening up a can of worms here is what you're doing. Yeah. Truth be told, the bandwidth capabilities of a coax cable are astronomical. To put it simply, mostly it comes down to the fact that the copper inside of there is so large compared to anything else that's out there, and the separation between the stinger. Or the
stinger and
stinger
and the braid and the
the
flow.
outside, because it has all that dielectric grease in there, or not dielectric grease, the
dielectrics
inside of it that's actually making the separation. So right then and there, you already have a massive amount of protection on it, and on top of all of that, it's not competing with itself. Instead of having a twisted pair next to another twisted pair, you don't have that going on. You just have one single thing that goes all the way through. That's where that's going to come into play. Now, it just like fiber.
And I asked purely from a residential standpoint.
Yeah.
I would never consider this for a commercial job anymore.
Yeah, no. Well,
Just because the ability to decentralize.
Oh yeah, decentralizing it is definitely one of the biggest advantages of IP. And now we're getting off topic, but yeah, it's Austin saying Brent prefers analog because he is analog.
A legacy fella.
You're a legacy fella.
What do you think my hi-fi is at home?
Leo saying he uses Siamese cable, Cat6, RG6, and 18.2. Yeah, that's a really good pair. A really good setup.
There's a lot you can do with any of it. First off, coax can be high-speed data or low-speed data.
Yeah.
The 18.2 can be a separate power channel. It could be an IR channel.
Yep.
And with the category cable, there's a whole lot you can do with that.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah, very much so. Okay, Brent, we're getting on to 40 minutes here, so let's go ahead and jump on to the last part that I wanted to talk about.
Which is?
How do you troubleshoot?
Well, let's start with Leo's problem.
Yeah.
Now, how would you see Leo's problem manifest itself on a job?
So let's look at exactly what's going on with his. He had to use the derogatory term, he had a Sparky come in after him and wrapped his coax cable.
And taped it, or Sparky pulled the coax, which can
One
happen
of the two,
too.
yeah. And ran it right there next to the 14 gauge AC line, which means that we're going to be getting a 60 cycle walkover onto our coax line.
Yeah, coax is more resistant to it typically than twisted pair because of the shielding on it. However, if you're paralleling the two, and if it's taped together, that certainly qualifies as paralleling and should not have been approved by the local governing inspecting body.
Right.
You're going to pick up a lot of 60 cycle.
Yeah.
And how will that manifest itself?
I was just about to ask you, what does that look like? So
typically what you'll see is that rolling line from bottom to top.
Yep.
Sometimes top to bottom, depending on the phasing.
Yeah. Back in the days of analog TV, watching it on cable and whatnot, you would get that fairly often on watching certain things. You would see this faint ghosting of a thing going up, or even severely, you would see it. It would take over the picture.
Now, if you get the herringbone, for example, which is that diagonal stuff, that generally indicated 110 near a bad termination.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because the cable, when you get to the termination, you reach that point where it's exposed. The cable is shielded all the way around.
Yeah.
So it handles the noise differently than an open point.
Yeah. So the way to troubleshoot all of that is if you see a rolling line, or if you see, well, a rolling line of any kind. the first thing to start with is to check and see, are you too close to power? That's the first thing to check. And Brent, we always talk about this, infrastructure. That's the first thing to look at.
How would you, okay, you got this rolling line.
Yeah.
How do you troubleshoot it at your DVR?
So without getting up in the attic, without rolling, going through and checking to see if we have anything else, or tearing apart the walls and whatnot to look at it, there at the for the DVR, the first thing that I would do is probably try a different port on the back of the DVR. Now this is me, just going in blind. I would check and make sure that we don't have just a weird, random, bad port. Move it over to a different port, we still have the same problem. So
well, the first thing you got to do is figure out which cable's doing it. And how do you do that?
Well, whichever channel it shows up on that, and well, okay. All right, so yes.
See, if you're getting it in there, it's going to show up probably across all channels.
Yeah, you are correct. If you were to go with a,
I love doing this to you.
This is you're running me down the tech support call
yes!
on this is what you're doing.
Okay.
Okay.
What do you do for a living?
I do tech support. Okay, so here's what's happening. What I would do in this case is I would say, okay, which channel is it on the strongest that you see it on? Because in most cases, you're going to see it on multiple channels because it is feeding into the rest of the system through the DVR. So the first thing I would do is I would still start with the one that sees the strongest. I would go ahead and disconnect it. Do all of the other cameras stop doing it?
Or is it at least reduced? Now, we're going to take it a step further because all those wires are bundled coming out of the attic.
Yeah.
If you do that and you're still finding the problem, what's your next step?
I would keep going. I would keep going until we find the...
Okay, but I've gone through all the openings, and there may or may not have been one that we can't tell which one it is. What do you do next?
I don't know.
Get
Where
out
would
your
you go
toner
next?
wand.
Okay.
Because your toner wand's going to pick up a little bit more of that 60-cycle noise on the affected cable between the tip and the ring.
So actually check it there at the BNC. So go take your toner wire or your toner wand and check it right at the end of it. So that's going to tell us, of course, if you hear it or whatever 60 cycles is, you're gonna. If you hear that, then you know that you've got that. There it is. That's what it is. Once you hear
that will help
that,
you find it.
Whichever one it's on the
Yeah.
strongest on, right? Because you may still pick it up on the others.
Oh, and you will because it's emanated noise.
Right.
But there will be one that the others you will not pick it up as much on the tip.
So then at that point, once we know which wire it's on, where do we go from there? Do we go to the camera and disconnect it at the camera and see if we still have it?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it could be injected noise at the camera from a bad power supply.
Yep.
Or bad joint or bad circuit board in the camera.
Yeah. So we disconnect that and it goes away entirely. If it goes away entirely at that point, is it the camera?
Probably, because it's still going to be put over the cable.
Yeah.
If it drops down but is still there, it's induced at the cable.
Oh man, we're getting some really good stuff on here. Okay, so to jump off of this, because once we've gone through and we've troubleshooted, we found out where the problem is for that cycle. If we can narrow it down to, okay, we hear the cycle here through the tone wand, we hear it on the other end as well. It's at that point we've disconnected the camera and it's still there on that wire. Guess what? The wire is too close to something.
And we're going to have to either pull a new wire or get up in the attic and find where that 110's next to it.
And just
separate
them. And how far? 3 feet? 4 feet? As far as possible?
As far as possible.
Yeah. So this is really cool. We've got a question coming in. Have you had any problems with the cable being copper clad instead of true copper? And he's asking this on like our tech calls.
I've had problems with picture quality.
Yes.
Copper clad steel will not give you the same picture that BC will. They're copper.
Now he's specifically.
But I can't say it from a noise standpoint.
Specifically talking about CCA, copper clad aluminum.
Yeah, no, please avoid that.
Yeah, as much as possible. Steel is copper clad aluminum, copper clad steel, copper.
BC.
Yeah, just straight copper.
When in the early composite days and the mid to late 90s, we're starting to see copper clad steel hit the market because quad cable had become the thing because of DirecTV. So BC copper was already starting to get expensive.
Yeah.
So there were people putting in copper clad steel, and the pictures just look anemic.
Yeah.
On copper clad steel versus BC. Aluminum, please.
It's just having an effect on it. So we also had the experts asking, are they making 12 megapixel TVI cameras? And Ellen, thank you for doing the research on that for us, or if you already knew, 12 megapixel TVI is being manufactured by Hikvision, but they are not in the US at this time. 8 megapixel is the highest resolution currently available. You have
And
that
8
answer there?
megapixel relates to what resolution?
Yeah. Sorry,
I'm asking you.
8 megapixel is 4K.
Okay.
Yep. 2 megapixel is 1080p, 8 megapixel is 4K, and then of course you can have anywhere in between. Usually it's going up, 1 megapixel, 2 megapixel, 4 megapixel, 5 megapixel, and then 8 megapixel is
2 bits, 4
usually
bits,
the
6
jump.
bits a dollar.
Pretty much. Let's see. Randall is saying hum bars can also be caused by ground loop current if grounds are at different levels.
Yes, they can.
So what does that look like, Brent?
We've already had that particular.
Yeah. What does that look like?
Grounding noise can be the rolling bars or herringbones, but typically you'll also get a nice audio with that one.
So you actually pick up a little
nice
bit of
hum.
noise on it. Okay. Pardon me. Let's see what else we have in
Your
here.
tonal wand is a wonderful tool to have.
Yeah, just the little tone wand and the generator that comes along with it that gives you a beep or a,
the tone wand, for what we're doing, the tone wand's more important than the generator.
Yeah. Let's see.
In this
Randall also
application.
says being unbalanced coax is susceptible to hum bars. 60 cycle power and 59.97 video sync causes the slow scroll roll. Correct, because
Wow.
yes.
I want to hear you say that again.
Okay. The way that you're describing it is exactly right. Why does it roll? And the reason is that you get a 60 cycle signal coming in or walking over
That's
top of a
slightly
59.
out of phase, right.
Exactly, a 59.97. So that's why you get a little bit of a roll, because every time that each one comes through,
They're
the
not
other
synced.
one's going to be slightly different. And so at that time, it's rolling all the way through to the
And
top.
you used to also see this if you took a video camera and pointed it at a TV.
Yep.
The lines became
You
very
would- you would
visible.
see those
That's
as
why
well,
whenever
yeah.
you see, the old videos of people pointing the cameras at the TV on
Yep,
television.
it goes vroom, vroom,
Yep.
vroom. Yep, exactly. Let's see. Oh man, really great stuff, guys. Keep it coming. That's awesome. Steve Barrett says carry a ground loop isolator as a tech tool and check for aluminum shielding.
Yes, Jensen.
Yeah, yeah.
They are great for that.
We had an episode with Rob, the electrician.
Yep.
And that was one of the things that he talked about. Bring here's a ground tech that will actually you plug it into the outlet and it checks for ground. Make sure you have good ground connection on it. Or a ground loop isolator, of course, as a.
And the
Yeah.
Jensen brand is the most common, but there's other companies that are video specific.
Do we make one in 12 volt?
We do for audio.
For audio, yes,
Yes.
which would be an RCA connection at that point. So you'd have to
Absolutely.
convert it, and probably shouldn't want to do that anyway.
Well, you couldn't do that for video.
Yeah, you would
But
lose. Yeah,
they will help audio. And there are guys that have put them in their residential systems for distributed audio where they've got receiving units that are on different circuits.
yeah, yep. Let's see. It would have a louder hum. Oh, the toner. Yeah, no. Unless you get the one that has the volume control on it. Then you make sure you don't have to blow out the client that you're there with. Let's see. Okay, Brent.
Adam.
This comes from Mike. He's asking, what's your first choice? Hey, Mike, thanks for joining the chat. He's asking, what's your first choice for BNC connectors? Twist, crimp, or two-piece?
Twist is out.
Twist is out.
Twist is
100%
out.
it's out. And actually, I'm going to fix this a little bit because outside crimp or compression crimp?
Compression crimp, period.
Yeah.
And here's why.
Yeah.
An outside crimp, can we go to the
Yep.
overhead?
Yep, sure can. You want it? Here, I'll take it. Really great stuff today, guys. Thank you so much for joining us in the chat. We really love to hear it from you, hear comments and questions from you guys. Go ahead, Brent.
Okay, this is an outside hex crimp. And the problem with this is your compression point is, pardon my lousy drawing, but you're not a conical connection. And the biggest change we saw in our industry in the late 90s was Cable Pro bringing out the conical crimp. And the original conical crimp was a
Is that conical or comical like Jim Carrey?
conical.
Okay, so it's not comical like a
No, when
comedian.
I did it, it was comical. The original crimp had this is a side view, a decreasing radius coming down with just a little bit of return there. So that this was smooth all the way around, so the dielectric was evenly compressed. When the dielectric's only pushed into specific points, it does affect the impedance.
Yeah,
And impedance is important.
it's very important.
Nobody wants bad impedance.
No, we want good impedance.
Now, what has changed since then, and Cable Pro was bought by Belden,
Yep.
is the inside one. Because the inside one has a sleeve that goes in over the dielectric, but under the braid and the foil. And then that's compressed into a slightly conical outer shell.
Yes.
So you're still getting this effect, but you're getting a much tighter, better controlled compression.
Yeah. Brent, what's the difference between, or since you drew this so well, how does the compression fitting work? How does that plate come into play?
Okay, well, we're going to take my hands and we're just going to choke the cable. So it's an even decreasing of the radius. So instead of trying to press there and press there and press there and press there, by decreasing the radius evenly, wow, that just looks wrong.
I was going to say,
it?
are you imagining your first or your second ex-wife?
No answer, because this is out in public domain.
Moving on.
But a decreasing radius conical crimp, preferably the two-piece, is the best way to go. Now, the next question is it two-piece as in a stinger that goes inside of the sleeve, or is it just two-piece with an outside compression? Let's go back to this.
Okay.
So these are two different 75 ohm compressions, but basically they're the same. In both cases, you have an inner sleeve that goes into the outer sleeve. This one already has the pin in it.
Yes.
So when you slide it in, I am not a fan of that one. I prefer to have the pin separate.
So that, you can make sure that it actually is connected to the stinger.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%.
The drawback with having it one piece is it looks easier, but it's really hard to get the stinger into that.
And make sure it actually makes the connection.
It's fully inserted. Whereas if you've got this one with the two-piece, you strip your cable back and you put the pin down on it and make sure it's fully there.
Oh man, this is a really great tech tip. Steve, you are today's honorary tech tip member. He says, if you suspect a grounding or bonding issue, carry a large enough UPS to power the DVR monitor and some cameras to verify if that's happening. Now, if you do that, what that's going to do is you
need to have it charged before you go to the job site.
Of course, make sure it's charged. But once you put the UPS into play, it will tell you if you have a grounding problem or if your wire is too close to power.
It's more than that. The UPS has to be left unplugged from the wall.
Yes.
By the way, we're down on that.
So long as it's disconnected from the wall, which means the battery power is the only thing that's powering those cameras.
And do not run the Coax for the TV through it.
Don't have anything connected to don't have anything connected to the system connected to the wall.
To the house.
So Ethernet connection to the DVR, coax connections to anything else, and anything that's not being powered by the system. Which really means
you need a 1500 volt amp UPS.
Yeah, and you're right. You really do want to power the TV that you are connected to as well off of that same UPS because it could still feed back into the system. But what that's going to tell you is, are you having a grounding problem, or are you having a problem because the wire is too close to the power? And that's going to kind of give you a definitive of what's going on.
We had the episode with Rob on grounding. We might want to revisit that in the future because we still get a lot of calls about that.
Yeah, but talk about tech tips. That's a really great tech tip. If you guys have, there's lots of times where you have like leftover product because the client's upgrading something and so you wind up with an extra UPS. Save that UPS, put a new battery pack in it, charge it up, use it for these problems here. A lot of times we have dealers that are large enough to where they have a specific team for troubleshooting. On that troubleshooting truck, you should have a UPS for this purpose.
It's always good to have one of the fold-up wheeled parts that you can put this in, so it's easy to pull it around because nobody wants to carry a UPS around. Yeah,
exactly. So, Brent, we are at an hour. I think we need to go ahead and wrap up. Really great comments today, guys.
Thank you,
really
everybody.
Appreciate that in the chat. If you have more to talk about, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. Or, of course, you can contact us directly as well. Our tech support line, of course, is down here, 386-492-8584. Or, of course, you can contact us directly. My email address is adam.rogers@metraav.com or brent.mccall@metraav.com. And, of course, you can call us directly. 386-202-6132 is my number. 6137 is Brent's number directly. So.
And at least mine follows my phone and my iPad wherever I go.
So, Mike, one last question says, what is your go-to camera tester? I don't have one. I'll be perfectly honest. I don't have a tester that I work with all the time. For me, I just use the system that I have there in front of me. But a tester would be a good thing to have.
There's a number of manufacturers out there making IP camera testers, and it's something we had looked at selling. But to be honest with you, the best we're going to be doing is a Me Too on it.
Yeah, pretty much.
And
Wasn't worth it. So
there's plenty of them out there that are good.
Yep.
That
Yeah, I would definitely do some research on it and find a good one that you trust with that. But
I would
that's pretty
find
much
one
it.
that still does the analog and the
That does
those
both.
formats.
Well, analog and IP would be a really
Yep.
good one to have. So, anyways, guys, thank you, and Ellen, of course, thank you for joining us today.
Well, I like to save on that one.
Oh yeah,
Guys
yeah,
and Ellen.
and if there's anybody else in
And there
in
could be plenty
the
of other
viewership.
women out there.
So-
you're just dissing them.
I'm just
right out
I'm
of
just
the
not
gate.
being all that great. So, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. If you have more stuff, of course, leave it in the comment section down below. As always, it's been a pleasure being here with you. And
Please subscribe. Tell your friends and neighbors to subscribe.
hit that little bell to let you know when we do go live, which, of course, is every Wednesday at 3 p.m. and now on Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time as well.
Friday's a slightly different show. It's more focused on our product and how to use it.
Yep.
Generally, it's Adam because he really does know the product very well.
Yep.
I'm sometimes here for comic relief as the legacy fella.
Pretty much. So, everybody, thank you as always. And, Brent,
Reboot early,
reboot often.
turn off CEC,
Don't get your wires too short.
call tech support. I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
Thank you.
We'll see you later. We're rooting for you.
Was it keep your stick on the ice?
That's what it is. Keep your stick on the ice.
Nathan, we're rooting for you.
Bye, everybody.